I've got such a great interview today. I shouldn't be surprised, right? I shouldn't be like an unexpected thing. But Matt Pierce, the founder of Immediate, as is my standard operating procedure, is I like to kind of learn about my guests in the middle of this whole process. And so I knew enough about Matt and his company to be, harmless. The His story and what he's built was so interesting and impressive to listen to. It was just it's cool. Like, it's really cool when somebody builds something that affects so many people in such a positive way. And I couldn't be more impressed with Matt and Immediate. It's incredible. With that being said, why don't you just go ahead and jump into, like, I do this. Let's start in 2004.
It was a good year at the beginning of 2004. I only needed 6 hours to graduate undergrad, right? And so I'll take you on a little, just paint this picture in your mind. I'm in Auburn, Alabama, coming into my spring of my senior year. I need 6 hours to graduate, but I was fortunate enough to still be on my parents' insurance, right? And in order to stay on their insurance as a full-time student, I had to have 12 hours of classes. So I took a couple of like bogus classes, one of which my wife still makes fun of me for, but one was tennis. I grew up playing tennis, so it was the easiest A I ever made. And then the other kind of easy class was Cajun dance. And I don't know if they still teach this at it was a guy who had grown up in Louisiana, was like a graduate assistant and something else, and just pitched to the university he was going to teach a Cajun dance class. And so Cajun dance is more just like a jig, but you do it to Cajun music. And then they also teach you the polka and the waltz and a couple other things. But I took this one so I could stay eligible for my parents' insurance, but two because it was me and four other guys and 35 girls in the class, and so I was like, "Listen, I'm a senior in college. I was single. This is a great place to go." And every day when you walk into class, it's just this great ego boost because you have like women running up to you and saying, "Let's dance," And so it was wonderful, wonderful spring. And from there, I graduated in May, was starting my MBA in the summer of '04, which also coincided with Auburn having a perfect season. We ended up going 14-0, had some really awesome players, Cadillac Williams, Ronnie Brown, and Jason Campbell, those guys. And so most of my friends who had graduated kind of moved on, but I got to be there and be a part of this and watch all of that unfold. And through starting in the MBA program, I ended up meeting a guy who was an Auburn MBA alum, and he offered me a job for the following summer to come be an intern at a company called Greenway, which was at the time a early stage healthcare technology company providing electronic medical records to physician practices. And so this would have been, going into that year, it was early 2005. You're talking like single digit adoption of technology at the point of care, right? I mean, this is back when, doctors still brought in that envelope with, that open the manila folder and write everything. And, they can't even tell what they're writing, more or less, they're nurses. And so we were at the forefront of technology trying to get docs to adopt EMRs and start bringing healthcare into the 21st century. And so that was my kind of, 12 to 18 months shift from Cajun dance to healthcare tech, early stage employee. I was employee 55 at that company, and we built it up, took it public in 2012. We're acquired for $650 million in 2013, and they merged us with two of our biggest competitors at the end of that year. And so when it was all said and done, we were a 300 million plus ARR business with 1,800 employees, and I was running business development, about a 22 million P&L with a team of 12 people, and I was sitting around a huge boardroom table at our headquarters with a bunch of people that were smarter and older than me, just thinking, how the hell did I get here? And it was all because of Cajun dance. I think that was it. So I think that's the right.
It must have been it. That well, you thought you'd figured it out. You're like, why is everybody bitching about how hard this life shit
It's
is? Like,
great.
I
You
got
just
this
figure out
locked.
something and you chase it, and next thing you know, you're a few years later, and you're like, well, what was that? It was just kind of like a snap. But it was, yeah, man, it was a lot of fun. It was neat to kind of make that transition. I was really fortunate. I mean, the funny thing about me getting my MBA is I had originally planned on going to law school, and I got waitlisted at the law school I wanted to get into, and I took that as kind of like a sign from above that you're waitlisted. I did pretty good on the LSATs, but I was like, you're waitlisted. Maybe that's a sign you don't really need to do this. I really don't want to do 3 more years of school, but I had a finance degree and I didn't want to, go into finance, and kind of learned that my last semester or two. And so a buddy of mine convinced me to take the GMAT, and made just good enough to get into the MBA program at Auburn, and interviewed well while I was there, and got in, and got to do a year and a half program there. And it was just, it was great. It was that my MBA program at Auburn was probably one of the like turning points in my career. Largely, I say my career. I mean, even though I was that young, I shouldn't say my career. Is a turning point in the way I viewed things. Right, like my first semester was Auburn was having a great football season. I was traveling a lot. I kind of kept doing my undergrad mentality of like stay up and out late doing whatever, and then go to class, and then go back and take a nap in the afternoon, and then maybe go to the student act, play some basketball, and work out, and then rinse and repeat. And going into my second semester of grad school, I started noticing that people who had gone out into the working world and then came back, they were operating in a whole different way. And I found this out because it was the first group project that I was on with one of those people who had gone out and come back. And this guy was probably in his early 30s. And I just said, hey, man, why don't we get together? I got a bunch of stuff to do this afternoon, napping and playing basketball. And I said, why don't we get together after dinner, maybe like 7:30, and we'll meet up here at the lounge, and we'll go 7:30 until 10. And the guy goes, I don't do school stuff after 5. And I said, I'm sorry. And he goes, look, man, I've been in the working world for the past 8 or 10 years, and this is my job. I show up here at 8 and I leave at 5. He's like, I got a family, I got kids, and that's their time, And he goes, so if you want to get together for this group project, our classes end at whatever 1:30. Between 1:30 and 5, I'm going to be in the lounge. We can come meet. And it really kind of it made me start to shift the way I approached school, which ultimately started making me shift the way I approached a lot of things. I ended up with a much better GPA in grad school than I did in undergrad. I learned a ton about people and about processes. It was just really good. And then obviously it helped open the door for me to get in to start working at Greenway, which turned out to be about a 10-year run for me. And so I hold those years in very high regard in my life, and still keep up with a lot of the people that I was in that MBA program with.
That's awesome. Yeah. The I think when you were talking about it, I was thinking about that time in life, and I didn't do grad school. I took a victory lap. I spent plenty of time in Tuscaloosa, and I'm like, I'm ready to go now. I'm good. But those, you look back now and you're like, God, I really did just get to like take a nap and, sort of do what you wanted to do, and you could work whatever hours you wanted, and it wasn't a big deal. And man, those were good times.
Those were the days. I tell my 4-year-old all the time, Dad, I don't want to nap. She told me the other day, I don't want to go to preschool. I said, why? And she's like, because nap time's too long. And I go, sweetie, there's going to be a day when you long for a nap, and you just need to enjoy it while you can. And she's like, well, today, that's not today. I don't want a nap today. So it's, you got to enjoy them when you can.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw something where it was like all the things I hated as a kid, like naps, vegetables, like the things that I'm chasing now.
Right.
Yeah.
It's, I think it's a little bit of, I think that's just a little bit of life. The things you want, the things you can't have, right? It's everybody gets Chick-fil-A cravings on Sunday. That's just how it goes,
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. So you spent 10 years working for the man. And then what happened after that 10-year run?
Well, once private equity came in, the company dramatically changed. There's somebody told me this a long time ago, and it makes so much sense. And I see it and feel it now as much as then, just in a different way, and obviously in a different position than I was. I was at that point, I was the head of business development, which was like partnerships for us. And as we have built that business, we had a lot of fun We grew the business like crazy, but there wasn't a lot of process, right? And when private equity came in, it wasn't as much fun. There was a ton of process. And I remember somebody telling me at that point, they were like, the best companies, I should say, have the right blend of culture and process, right? And when you take a pendulum of like what we were, which was probably overly focused on culture and not enough focused on process, and then the pendulum swung the opposite direction to overly processed and not enough culture, you just start to see a mass exodus, right? People start bolting because they're like, well, this isn't the same company I was, I've been at for the past 10 years. It doesn't feel the same, and et cetera, et cetera. And I get it. I see both sides of it. If you're, private equity, you spent $650 million to buy a company, you want to put your processes in place that and make sure that this thing's successful. You're going to get a return out of it. If you're the people that were there that helped it get there, you want to go, well, hey, trust us. We've been doing this thing really well. Like, let us keep doing it. And so I do feel like that, and that's as I fast forward to like today, the interesting thing is like and not to skip too far ahead, but as a founder, when you start, you're just shooting from the hip, man. You're just figuring it out. You got to do what you got to do, and you do a lot of things that don't scale, and you do a lot of things that are like culturally really rich. And then as you start building the company, you start bringing on more and more people. You kind of go, okay, well, everybody's not going to operate the same way as me. I'm the biggest shareholder. I've got the most in it to win or to lose, right? And not everybody's gonna work 80 hours a week like me, right? And so you kind of start to back off a little bit from culture and go, all right, well, let's put some process in place. Let's not overly process it because we're a 50 or 60 employee company, but you want to put enough process in place that you can create metrics where you can understand if people are or are not having success, and if they aren't, how do you get them better. But then you also want to make it a place where people want to come and be a part of it and enjoy it. And so it really comes down to finding that right natural blend of culture and process. And I feel like we've done a really good job here. When I felt, at this point, gosh, almost 10 years ago, when I left Greenway, I felt it overly processed. And I was probably one of the people that was a little more like, hey, especially for my department, we've been killing it for years. And I just kind of felt like, look at this, these guys are coming in and trying to tell us all the ways we need to do our jobs when we've been doing a pretty dang good job. And so I ended up getting recruited to a company in Boston to go run growth for them. They had just bought an electronic medical record company, a smaller company. And I went in and kind of rebuilt the sales org and started putting more partnership programs in place. And I did that for about 2 years. I was commuting back and forth from Atlanta to Boston every other week, which was a lot. And then I was recruited out west to a company that was pre-Series A. I was employee like 25, and got to go out there. And so then I switched to, like, I didn't want to move to LA, so I was commuting every third week from Atlanta to LA, and was building out distribution partnerships and traveling the country, and it was awesome. But also had like a young kid, and so I started like really getting burned out on being on the road. And so after about a year of that, we parted ways, and I was like, you know what, I want to do something for the next few years that's going to lead me to my first true company. And so I just started doing growth consulting. I was my own boss for a little while. That was probably the end of 2016, early 2017, and I'm going to go down the self-employed route, and I worked with probably 15 to 20 different companies over the next couple of years, where I'd go in and do like interim head of sales, chief strategy officer kind of stuff. I mean, you name it. I just had a lot of healthcare technology experience, and knowing in the back of my mind that either one, I wanted to find a company that I really liked and enjoyed what they were doing, where I could jump in full time, kind of try before you buy kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or that it would set me up to a place where I could still have some income while I went out and tried to start a company, which is ultimately what I ended up doing.
Yeah, that's a lot you packed into what was the time frame between immediate and leaving Greenway?
So I left Greenway summer of 2014 and started working on immediate September 2018. Launched our first customer September 2019. So yeah, probably 4.5 years.
Yeah, you packed a lot in there during that time frame. But when going back to talking about what it was like when we were younger, it's a little bit easier to run faster, and travel all the time and do all those things pre kids and
It's a lot easier when you can go do those things and really sink your teeth into them. It's interesting because I think if you ask me when is the right time to start a company for somebody with the entrepreneurial spirit, it's hard to say, right? Because everybody's got their own things. I really looked at my 20s and early 30s as kind of my extended MBA. I went to a year and a half program. I learned a ton, made good contacts, got into this great place. I knew from college that I wanted to start a company. I knew that that was going to be one of the things I wanted to do in my life. I wanted to be a business owner. Didn't know what it was going to be, what kind of business, all those things. I remember when I was a sophomore, I was sitting in a marketing 101 class, and this girl that I was dating was with me, and we walked out. Somebody came in and gave a speech this day, like an entrepreneur or something, and we walked out, and she said, "I could see you doing that one day." And I said, "Giving a speech to a marketing 101 class?" And she is like, "No, you dumb. Like starting a company." And I was like, "Hmm." I go, "Like what?" And she goes, "I don't know. I just think that you would be good at that kind of thing." And it really, like, it sunk in. And 20 years later, I still remember. I mean, I remember that conversation very vividly. It sunk in that I knew that this was something I wanted to do. I kind of felt like it was the strings of the universe drawing me towards it, or whatever you want to call it, fate, whatever. And so I was always kind of looking for that. And so when I looked at it, I was like, well, what's the best way to get there? Well, I'd love to go learn under other people's tutelage, right? And I got to do that at Greenway. Man, there were some really smart, sharp, good people that I got to learn. I mean, some of my favorite people in this world were people that I worked with there. I mean, I still keep up with a lot of them. And so I got to go do that. And so I really looked at my 20s and early 30s as like, this is my extended MBA where I can learn. And I learned a lot under that one roof, right? But then it was like, all right, I'm going to go to two different companies. Those are two very different companies. The one in Boston was like, it was owned by like basically a family office was the primary investor of this business. So it was run very different than like a privately held VC backed build up to public to private equity backed. It was very, they were thinking about like slow build, long term. Let's create this profitable thing that spits off cash for the family, and then go into like I'd not done a West Coast company, go into a West Coast company that was like burning a ton of money, raised a bunch of money, was just like let's just run and gun. And man, they were doing it, and it was a really good business that built up. And they had a big merger about a year or so ago, and that company's still growing. And so it was neat to get to feel all those different types of businesses and kind of curate all that and go, all right, well, what kind of business am I going to build, and how are we going to do this when I actually go do it? And so I took a lot of that as getting paid to learn and grow, and have some really cool experiences that I could try to take and create into a business that I start, and hopefully replicate some of that success.
You know, um, One of the things you just said was that you got paid to learn and grow, which is honestly what every job is. It just depends on how you decide to take it, right? You can take it as
Right.
I'm getting paid to come here and punch this widget and go home, or it's like I'm getting
Mm-hmm.
paid to get an MBA. And I remember thinking about, especially in marketing, people I knew that went and got, an advertising or marketing MBA. And I'm like, okay, so you paid for that. And I just went to work and got paid for
Right.
doing that. And oh, by the way, now I'm a couple years ahead of you, in that
Mm-hmm.
sense. And from that perspective, I didn't see the value in it back then. Maybe now that would be different if I went and looked at it differently. In business, it might be different. And certainly there's other verticals where you have to do it. But I do love that idea of like, it's all about the the perspective you take in the
Right.
job that you
For
have,
sure.
and if you and how you look at it. So I love the getting paid to do it. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, and you described this, and this is interesting, is that I hear a lot about how that they're teaching entrepreneurs, and they're kind of teaching them more of this West Coast mentality that you talked about, which is like get a big office, hire a bunch of people, burn it through cash. You're not profitable. You're just trying to get as many subscribers or whatever it is that to make it look like a sellable asset to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
They're not
Right.
actually teaching always how to build a sustainable business.
Mm-hmm.
It's like massive growth. And then Boston, East Coast was a little bit more organic, right? So which one of these
Right.
two did you lean into?
um, so it's interesting how things kind of change, right? Like, and just really candidly, personally, I'm a like super fiscally conservative person, right? Like I've budgeted all my life. I've got two brothers. My mom used to make jokes about how, they would both have all of their allowance spent before they even got it, right? Like they know exactly what candy they were going to buy on Friday afternoon when they got their $5 allowance. And I would take it and put it in an envelope that I kept in my sock drawer. And I remember one summer I saved up until I had $94 and I went and bought like $80 worth of baseball cards. And I told my mom as a first grader that I was going to hold on to these and that I was going to sell them for more money in the future. I didn't know there was an investment, right? But I was like, I'm going to sell these for more in the future, and it's going to be how I buy my first car, and it's like a 7-year-old saying this, right? And so I've always kind of had this mentality. So when we first got started and we're bootstrapping, I'm very much like, all right, I'm not taking a salary. We're going to try to keep this thing as lean as possible. We're going to try to get it off the blocks, get going. And so we ran it really lean early on the first year or so. And once we started having some success, we were like, all right, let's go raise some money. Let's still be frugal. Let's still invest wisely. But we're in a fast moving market where we've got to try to compete and stay ahead. And so we raised some money. And I remember at one point we were burning, I don't know, like $70,000 or $80,000 a month. And I just remember thinking like, oh my gosh, like how in the world did we get here? Like, what are we doing? Like, how can we do this? Like this, but that kind of that extending yourselves as a business and a recurring revenue business is like, all right, we're doing this because here's what our multiples are. Here's where we can get. And so we start building up and then that number starts coming down and then we went and raised more money and then we started to ramp up, put spend into growth as well. And so I feel like we've done a good job of balancing burning cash and really candidly, we're still burning cash today, but we're doing it in a way that is very strategic, is very growth focused, allows us to kind of pull levers if and when necessary. We were doing a round of funding like 2 years ago, and somebody was like, "All right, what's your path to profitability?" And I remember like in my head kind of laughing, like, path to profitability, like our biggest competitors, raised it $1 billion and they're still burning cash, because this is a high growth market. We're going to burn cash for a while, and I probably gave them some answer of like, hey, we can build a pro forma to get there, but that's probably not what you want us to do in the next 3 to 5 years, because we want to keep building this thing in a high growth market until we get over the hump, right? And so, but where we are today is a very different climate from a financial perspective and from an investment community perspective. And so we've, in the past, call it 3 or 4 quarters, we've really adjusted our long-term horizon and growth focus. And we have this very clearly defined path to profitability and what we've got to do to get there. Long answer to a short question, but it's a blend of those two where we've strategically invested in growth in places where we've burned cash, but also have this path to achieving profitability, which I believe once we hit that, it'll make this company considerably more valuable as a business, and ultimately that's what we care about. I mean, I think you're right that there's a lot of schools of thought out there of like, let's just go and throw money at a problem until somebody else comes and buys it, and profitability will be the next guy's problem, right? Whoever buys you. Or you can build a business like quote unquote the right way that is towards profitability and then continuing to invest with some capital in the books. And so I think that times have forced entrepreneurs to change over the past few years. There's obviously still a lot of companies out there that are having a lot of success, that are still burning a lot of cash, but there's others that I think are really being more thoughtful and pragmatic about the way you build and grow a business. One of my favorite things is an article or might have been like a snippet from a book, but it was a Buffett quote where he was like, if you're an entrepreneur, you should build it as if this is the only asset that your family owns. You should build it as if it's going to be around 100 years from now, right? And it's like, if you think about it that way, you really start to change your mindset on how you're going to build a long-term sustainable business. There's definitely a lot of different schools of thought to it, but I feel like we're doing this the right way here at Immediate.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, and I agree with that. I like the approach of building something that's meant to be sustainable, because it's not just about you. There's people that work with you and are helping you build it, and you have a bigger responsibility than just to make it look big on paper. So we kind of jumped ahead a little bit. Let's take it back At what point did the idea for immediate come to you? And then how did it come to fruition? And then we spoke before. I want to make sure that you don't forget to add this in about somebody telling you weren't ready yet.
um, so yeah, I'd been doing this kind of like consulting stuff, and had a situation with a family member. My grandmother had had a stroke in early 2017, and not like not a really bad one, but it was enough where she just needed some help, right? And so we had hired a non-medical home care agency. She lived in Auburn, which was great when I went to school there because she made me a banana pudding every week. Back when I could eat a banana pudding, a whole thing of it every week, and still had the metabolism to burn through it. But she had unfortunately had a stroke and just needed some help, and so we had brought some people in and kept having issues with people like not showing up. I got a call, I was living in Atlanta at the time. I got a call one day, and it was probably like around noon Eastern, and I answered, and her name was Virginia. We called her Ninny, and I said, "Hey, Ninny, how you doing?" And she goes, "Matt, I could really use some help." And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "A person never showed up today, and I'm still in bed. Would you mind coming over and helping me get up and get going?" And so this is 11 o'clock Central Time, and I said, "Oh my gosh!" I said, "Ninny, I'm so sorry." And I said, "I got some stuff going on this afternoon. Let me cancel it real quick." I was like, I can be there in 2.5 hours." She goes, 2.5 hours? And I said, "Well, yes. I mean, I can speed. I'll try to be there in 2 hours and 10 minutes." And she goes, "Is this Matt, the neighbor?" So she had called the wrong Matt, and no, Matt, your grandson. And she goes, "Oh my goodness!" And she just hung up. And so I was like, "Well, what do I do now?" So fortunately, I had Matt, the neighbor's number, and he was a pilot, and he fortunately was home that day. And I called him, and he went over there. He helped her, took care of her. And then, of course, like once you get past the problem solve, like the anger kicks in a little bit, and you're like, "Man, how is this company operating in a way where someone no shows an appointment and 3 hours later nobody in our family was still notified?" And so I had that entrepreneur thought of there must be a better way. So I initially started building a scheduling and caregiver transparency platform out of a need for my family. And so I started building that while I was doing consulting, and recognized it was a small market. But I was like, you know what? There's 30,000 home care agencies, and man, we can go out here and build a pretty decent business. And so what I did was I built in as I started talking to prospects and what some became customers, and figuring out that a lot of these agencies were billing in arrears with net 30-day terms. So let's just say, somebody goes to your house on the second. They're going to bill you at the end of that month, and then they're going to give you 30 days to pay it. So as an agency, you may process 2 or 3 payrolls, where you're having to float those funds yourself before you actually ever get paid. And so as a small business, it's hard to do, when you got 30 or 40 employees. The bigger ones, as I come to find out, they've kind of made that leap. And so what I did was I built a credit card processing engine inside the platform, where you could put a credit card on file, and once they came and visited you, they'd hit your credit card and they'd charge you for that day. And I would just take like a little cut, like a 4% cut off the top. So basically, the for the agency, they would be getting 96% of what they would normally get, but they were getting paid then, so they could actually have it improve their cash on hand. And so I did that for about a year and a half, and decided to start going after bigger clients. So I had like, I don't know, maybe 8 customers, not a real big book of business, right? But enough that was kind of nights and weekends kind of thing that I was doing. And I went into a 2,000 employee company, and I got done, and the lady was just like, "We've already figured all this stuff out." She's like, "But I do like your credit card processing thing. Could you do that for my employees?" And I said, "If you use my credit card processor, I'll do anything you want." And she's like, because I knew there was a lot of money flowing through that thing. And she's like, "No, no, 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 not going to use it. Please stop selling that. But can you do something where you pay my people at the end of the day?" And I go, "How would I do that?" And she goes, "I don't know. You're the technology guy. Figure it out." That was literally her term. "You're the technology guy. Figure it out." And I left, and I started spending a lot of time thinking about it, like, how could we do this? And so, kind of full circle, if in my opinion, if you're operating with a long-term big picture mindset, this is the way things start to open up for you, right? Like for me, I knew from college I wanted to start a company. I took all my jobs as opportunities to get paid to learn and grow and problem solve, quite frankly, right? And so here we are at this pivotal crux in my career of, all right, she said, figure it out. This is a huge issue, right? And because what I found was when I had that conversation, was I put on my consulting cap for a minute. I was like, why is that such a problem? She's like, because people leave working here all the time to go somewhere else for 25 cents more an hour. And I think if I could provide them with a service where they could get paid at the end of a shift, they're more likely to stay here, right? She's looking for a competitive differentiator in a crowded marketplace, right? And so I go in and said, all right, how can I figure this out? Well, I went back to my days at Greenway where I started a marketplace where we had built out an API, an application programming interface, where we would allow third parties to come access our data, right? Like our practice manager, EHR data, so they could provide bolt-on services that we would sell on our marketplace and would take like a 25% cut off the top. And so the way we did that was by exposing sets of data in a way that was, they could only access that data if they signed a partnership agreement with us, they agreed to give us a revenue share. So I was like, if a EMR company could do that, I gotta assume a time tracking and payroll company could do that. And so I started doing some research and figured out like, all right, hey, if I could get a feed of data from a time tracking system and I get a feed of data from a payroll system that shows me their hourly rate, how many hours they worked, I can match that up and normalize it inside an app, and I can give people access to their money before they get paid. Now I got to find some money that I actually get to fund them, right? But I think I can do that. And so I picked up the phone and called a mentor of mine who had a pretty successful exit, and I kind of pitched him on this idea, and he said, "It's a great idea. How much money do you need?" And I said, "I don't even know." I was like, "I go, let me figure it out."
How much do you have?
But I was able to write, yeah, just write me a blank check. I'll take that. So he ended up funding the first facility. Like today, we have a $20 million debt facility that we use that we can kind of continue to put out there. But he funded that first facility where I just guaranteed him a percent on top of it. So it was just an investment to him, right? So, hey, Matt, I'm going to give you this, and we're going to pay you X percent APR or APY, I should say. And we used that to make our first transfers. We built out the system. He connected with a technology guy who's our CTO today. And we built this system that allows employees to access their already earned wages. And we do that for free to an immediate debit card or a flat rate $3 transaction fee to a bank account or bank issued Visa or MasterCard. And it really is designed as a responsible alternative to predatory lending services like title and payday loans. And then what it does, the kind of the byproduct for the employer, like what this lady thought would happen, is it dramatically reduces your turnover because there's so few companies doing this today that if you go out and offer this to your employees, they're more loyal to you. They're less likely to leave to go somewhere else. Because if I go to work at XYZ company down the road, I only get paid every 2 weeks, but here I have the ability to get paid on demand once I've earned it. And so I'm going to stay here. So that was kind of the genesis of what we did and what we launched. We took our first customer live September 2019, and we've been growing ever since.
Man, that's awesome. I mean, what I love about it is the simplicity of it, right? It was like, how do I take this data feed and this data feed and solve this problem? And now we're oversimplifying it because there's a lot more to it than just that. Hey, you're the technology nerd, just go figure it out, right? But it makes a ton of sense though, and that was when you were talking. I wrote down like, is retention one of the measurable benefits? And you just kind of answered that question, which is, yeah, if you know you're going to get your money, the 25 cents doesn't matter much because you're not going to get it till whenever, and you need it now, and that's awesome.
Well, I was going to say it's really cool when you look at some of our case studies, and these are on our website, but one of them is a fast food chain that has a little less than 1,000 employees, but they have 44% enrollment. And when we compare those that are enrolled versus those that are not enrolled, we see 37% less turnover with those that are enrolled. I mean, you look at the fast food industry. I mean, these are companies that their average turnover is 80 to 150% for organizations like that, right? Like, it's the reason that when you go to fast food places, and a lot of people will be like, well, I can go to Burger King here and I can go to Burger King down there. Why is it so different, right? It's because of turnover. You got people that are if a company's turnover 100% a year, it means when I go today in January and I go again next January, nobody that's working there today is still going to be working there a year from now. That's the math on it, right? And so when you can take that and you start to reduce some of that turnover, what you do is you start creating more consistency. At a restaurant, that's one thing, but take it a step further and think about that in a senior living facility, right? where you've got an aging family member and they've got 60% turnover, and we can get them to see 30% in enrollment, and then we'll reduce that turnover of that 30% by, call it, 25, 30%. That's substantial, because now you're talking about continuity of care, right? And somebody that your grandparents or your parents who are living in that community are getting to see the same faces day in and day out. And there's just a lot of value to this. It's hard for people to grasp that sometimes, because I think like, I agree with you. The simplicity of it is beautiful. If I pull my CTO in here to go, it ain't that simple, bro, and I agree with them. Like, I know that there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes. There's been a lot of work over the last 5 years to make sure, but that's what's so beautiful about things like this. Like, you work really hard to make something look really simple. I always think about the Floyd Mayweather example of, like, this guy's 50-0, right? Never lost a professional boxing match. Somebody, he was being interviewed one time, and somebody said, "What? You make it look so easy out there." And he's like, "It looks easy because it's so hard in practice. Like, you don't see all the times I get punched in the face by a guy who's 30 pounds bigger than me, right? You don't see all the work behind the scenes. You see me out there in the ring, and it looks easy because I practiced so hard, right?" And so this is a similar thing. Like, the model sounds simple. There's a lot of really difficult stuff that goes into it behind the scenes. We work really hard to make it really simple for the user and for the employer, so they can deliver this benefit to their team in a really seamless fashion. And it's one of the things I'm most proud of, is that I could take, and if there was a screen share on here, I'd pull it up and show it to you. I literally drew out the process flow for the first. I drew it. Like, I'm not a technologist. Like, I don't know how to write code. I drew it, right? And then I took a picture of it, and I created a PNG. And so it's like transparent background, and I put it into a slide, and I sent it to Jason, who's our CTO, and he still had a full-time job. And I'd send it to him on Saturday and go, "Hey man, look at this and see if this makes sense." And he took this like quote unquote wireframe, and turned it into a product that's now, supporting hundreds of thousands of people across households in all 50 states. And we're delivering, tens of millions of dollars this year. We'll deliver 9 figures worth of earned wages in 2024. I mean, it's just crazy to think of what we've done, all from a really simple statement that somebody made of, like, go figure it out, right? You're the technologist, go figure it out. And we figured it out. So we're still figuring it out, but
The elegance of it is really cool. And I also like the idea that, and you talked about this, like, continuity creates familiarity, which creates trust, which creates, like, the waterfall of positive return you get from that extends well beyond just the retention of the actual employee. It extends to the retention of the customer, and the advocacy of the customer, and the advocacy of the employees, which is all that goodwill and referral stuff that comes out of that, after of a simple thing of like, hey, I just want to get paid on time or earlier, or the day after I do the thing that I do. And that's the devil that you do know in a lot of cases. So that 25 cents doesn't seem as enticing anymore. We're looking at, like, I know that these people take care of me, and that's all I need to know.
100%. It's there's so many intangible pieces of what we do, and just really bluntly, it's one of the more difficult parts of a sales process, when you're talking to these companies that go, yeah, sounds, maybe they'd like it, sounds good, it's not really a priority for us right now. And you're like, I hear you. I also recognize that I'm going to paint with a broad brush here for a second, but a lot of salespeople lie, right? It's just what it is. I will also say a lot of prospects lie, right? So there's an important piece of, like, kind of cutting through all that. And one of the values that we operate with here at Immediate is transparency, and just being really transparent about what we do and why we do it and how we do it. And there's been times where I've shared things on a sales call, where somebody's called me afterwards, usually our CTO, and he'll call me and go, "Hey man, I don't think you need to share that much stuff on these calls." And I'm like, I hear you, but I'm going to do that because nobody else is going to do it. I'm going to share those things because they're not going to get that from anybody else. And I want them to recognize that that's the way we operate. There is, if you go to our website, or you look at our it's black and white. Those are our primary colors. It's black and white for a reason, because we're very transparent. We say what we're going to do. We do what we're going to say, right? And I just think that's a really important piece of the puzzle. It goes back to some of the things that I've learned in my career. When you operate with high integrity and you operate in a way that makes sense and that people see it and they can trust you, they believe in you, and they're going to stick with you. I can say that since we started this company, we have lost 4 customers. From September 2019 until today, we've lost 4 customers. All 4 of those were acquired by another company. And they wanted to take us with them. So what that really means is we have net zero attrition. And that's one of the things I'm most proud of at this company is like, yes, we're providing an incredible financial wellness benefit. Like, yes, we're helping people like stay free from the bonds of title and payday loans and run up credit card debt and writing bad checks and all those things that can create cycles of debt. That's a huge, important thing. But you know what? If we don't do our job the way we say we're going to do our job, if we don't make it really easy and seamless on the HR and payroll people at your company, because we have to partner with an employer to do this, if we don't do that, then they don't get the impact of it, right? And so it's one of the things I'm most proud of is that our team has done a really incredible job from an implementation perspective, a customer success perspective, and a support perspective to make sure that we don't lose customers. And that, to me, it all comes back to being black and white, doing what we say we're going to do. And so that's something that I feel like we're unmatched in our industry as it pertains to that, because we've done such a good job of focusing on those things and just relentlessly pursuing it day in and day out to take care of everybody that we get an opportunity to take care of.
Honestly, it's amazing that you've had 4 people, like you said, zero, net zero attrition. That's, I've never heard of that before. So I don't even know how to like classify or quantify that. It's like Matt,
well,
full of shit.
If I
I'm just kidding.
Well, I'll tell you this: the one asterisk. I don't want to. I don't really believe in jinxes, so I'm just going to throw it out there. One of those groups in particular was acquired by a larger company, and they've been pushing us into the larger company that acquired them. And they're like, this was the highest enrolled voluntary benefit we ever had. We need to keep this, or we need to bring this back for not only our team, but for everybody at this company. And we're trying, we're working hard. I'm like that. I don't even know what I guess that becomes like net positive retention. I don't even know how that would work. Like it's not net zero attrition. It's like, I don't know, that math is going to escape me in my Auburn finance degree.
I'm glad you said it and I didn't have to.
I knew where you were going.
That's right. Man, that's incredible. So, and actually, I'll kind of bring back the idea of what we talked about, which is like, are we just trying to get as many customers for the sake of getting customers? Because I think one of the net realities of that is a higher attrition rate in a lot of cases, right? And even when you really are organic and customer focused, that there's still typically some attrition, but it's usually a lot lower, right? Because you're very much focused on taking care of what you got, doing the things you said you were going to do, all the stuff that, trying to, the things that you're supposed to be doing.
100%. It's to me, look, we could talk about this as a broad life lesson in general, right? It's the same way of your personal finances, down the yellow brick road saying, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there, right? If you know where you're going, you know where you want to be. You're listening to this and you're 25 years old and you say, I want to have a net worth of $500,000 by the time I'm 35. That's a goal. You got to figure out how you get there, right? And you go, well, you know what, if I can invest in stock markets or I can invest in rental properties or whatever it may be, if I can build these things out to where I can create an 8 to 10% return on whatever I invest in over the next 10 years, and let's just say you're starting with $25,000, you go, all right, what do I got to do to get there? How much do I have to put aside? Am I going to do side hustles? Am I going to go do Shipt or drive Lyft at night so I can put all that money directly into investments? Like that's the way that you build with a long-term strategy, right? Versus somebody who just goes, I just got a raise. I was making $48,000 a year. Now I'm making 53. So I'm gonna make $5,000 more a year, which boils down to whatever, like $350 more a month after taxes. Awesome. I'm going to go get me a new car that's $350 more. Well, you just went back in the hole, right? And so it's kind of about figuring out what you want to do. So is if you're a business and you're an entrepreneur and you go, hey, I want to build this business where this is the last job I'm ever going to have. And I want to do this for the next 30 years. And I'm going to build this thing nice and slow. And I'm going to have a lifestyle business. And I want to achieve profitability in the first 18 months. And I know in order to do that, I can get an SBA loan and I can build like this. And then I'm going to get to a place where I've got somebody running the company and I'm in my lake house and I'm getting, I'm getting my share of the profits every month. Like, that's a pretty good place to be. It may take you 18 years to get there, but you got to build that plan. And so for us, it's like, hey, if we want to help people on a lifelong financial wellness journey, we've got to do this the right way. We've got to build a solid foundation for us to build this company on. And the solid foundation is a really awesome product that scales and that doesn't take advantage of people, right? That helps people make better financial decisions and find and sustain financial happiness. And if we can do that and we're building with a long-term plan in mind, then we're going to be successful. And it's the reason that we've got net zero attrition, is because we're not just going in and trying to money grab and get as much money from people as we can today so we can try to sell this thing in 6 months. Like, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to build a long-term sustainable business that's going to impact people's lives for years and years to come.
Yeah. Well, it speaks to the value to the employees too, though, because if the companies aren't willing to unwind it in any way, they're like, well, I'm not taking that away from them because you got such a high sign up rate and it's helping all these other things. Like, it's sort of and you were talking about when you go and you talk to people and you sell them, sometimes they're just like, this isn't the right thing for you. And I sometimes take that personally because I know it's the right thing for them, and they're saying, oh, it's not for us. We don't really need this and it's not going to help us. And I don't see the value. And there's times when I'm like, I don't want to argue with you, but you're so wrong at this point,
right?
And how much it really would help you. But when you've come up with something that has, and this knock-on effect and all these other benefits, then you've really done the right thing. Like, you tried to solve one thing, but you solved 5 things in solving that one. And I think that's special. So that's incredible, man. That's awesome.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
A little bit of time left. Let's talk about growth. Let's talk about what you're doing from a, marketing perspective and what does the next 12 months look like for you guys?
We've posted triple-digit growth for 4 straight years, and the plan is to keep that going. We're going to do it again this year. And when I say that, I'm talking revenue growth. And obviously it gets harder to do that as the numbers get bigger. It's harder to do that year in, year out, but that's our plan for this year. We invested heavily in the second half of last year and kind of refocusing our growth team. We brought on some more experienced sales executives who have been doing this for years and years and have come in and are doing a really great job. We've also kind of made a bit of a pivot historically. Look, we're in Alabama. I can give the hunting analogy. I think most people will get that. When we first started, we were hunting with a shotgun, right? Would take anything. And what we've learned over time is certain industries and types of businesses that are where we have the most referenceability, which means a shorter sales cycle. We have highest engagement, enrollment, and usage, which means more impact, right? And so we've really started focusing on a handful of industries, specifically healthcare and hospitality is where we've had the most success. And so our sales team is focused there, and then kind of swimming upstream historically would say, all right, well, and we've got, I think our smallest customer is like 6 employees. Our largest live customers around 40,000 employees and everything in between, right? But if I look at last year, I think our average customer size last year was, for net new business, was around 650 employees. And right now, our Q1 pipeline, the average size is a little north of 3,000 employees. And so really what we've started trying to do this year is swim upstream a little bit into that mid-market and enterprise and really start focusing there on bigger and bigger deals. Largely because, if it's going to it takes the same to sell an 800 to 1,000 employee company, you might as well go ahead and try to sell a 3,000 employee company, right? You're going to get triple the value. And when you've got more experienced salespeople, they want to take on some of those larger deals. And so we've readjusting our focus over the last quarter or so coming into this year, and now we're heads down on it. And we've got contracts out right now for an 8,500 employee company. We've got a couple that are north of 10,000 that we're really close to, and so we're feeling really good about the way we're doing that. And so to support that from a marketing perspective, we brought on a new director of marketing in Q3, and she's doing an awesome job of just kind of like recalibrating our focus. Right, when you've kind of in the past gone like, all right, let's go after anybody and everybody. She's going, all right, let's come in and let's really drill in and let's make sure that we've got content, we've got case studies, and we've got opportunities to get on stage at conferences that are specific to that type of business. And so it goes from hunting with a shotgun to hunting with a rifle with a scope on it, right? And that's what I feel like we're doing this year is we're being really laser focused on types of businesses in certain geographic areas and really zeroing in there. And so it's fun to see things all kind of start coming together from a growth perspective. You know, when marketing, sales, and partnerships are all kind of hitting on the same page and really catching a good stride, it's exciting to see how that works and really starts to ramp things up.
For sure. Do you feel like 4 years into it now that you're still having to do a lot of education? Or is this something that people are kind of like, yeah, I've heard of this before and we've considered it, or you're having more competitors? Like what's the landscape like when you're having these initial conversations?
We're definitely having more competitors, but another part of us going after larger groups is because we're finding that they are more educated on this type of benefit. And so we're not spending as much time educating up front on the value of earned wage access or on-demand pay. It's more about the differentiation for us, right? I tell people a lot of times, like, all right, well, hey, you know what this is? We're going to skip to chapter 3 about how we do it differently, right? And that, you know, versus, gosh, 5 years ago, you know, you get on a call and somebody go, wait, what is this? This is like, you know, and then rattle off a list of all the things they thought it was. Like, no, it's not any of that. You know, somebody's like, oh, we don't do advances. I'm like, great. That's, you know, this is, or the shortest sales cycle I had was a guy walked up to me at a conference and he goes, would this replace me having to do pay advances? And I said, you do pay advances? And he goes, yeah. He goes, my guys come in, he works at a manufacturing plant, knock on the door and they come in and go, hey man, I got such and such going on. Can I get an advance of $100 and just take it out of my next paycheck? And he's like, you know, I'd do it. And then they go tell somebody, and then I have a line of people out the door. And I was like, that's a slippery slope, man. He goes, so I don't ever have to tell them, I don't have to do that again. I go, you just tell them to download the app. And he goes, where do I sign? Literally had a TV up at the conference. I pulled a DocuSign up and I go, you can sign right here. And he signed the DocuSign while we were on the conference floor. It's great. Those days, you know, a few years ago, there was a lot of education. Sometimes you go, I get 20 minutes into a 30-minute call and you're still explaining what it is, why it's needed, and you go, okay, hey, in the last few minutes, let's go ahead and make sure we get this next meeting scheduled so I can talk to you specifically about how this works and how simple it is, right? And now we're getting to kind of jumpstart that. And so I do feel like there's a more educated buyer. Market is still less than 20% penetrated, so we still have huge greenfield in front of us. Yeah, and so there's a lot of good things going on, and especially for, you know, the companies that are coming into this today. It's tougher sledding coming in today because we're fortunate we got in here. We started this in 2018. We were able to lock up some really good rates on debt before the interest rates really started skyrocketing. And so, you know, a company that comes in today that's never done this before and doesn't have a history is going to come in with, you know, 15 to 25% APRs they got to pay on whatever debt they're taking out, and it makes it cost prohibitive for them to go out and offer a service to do this and keep it in a place where it's to keep the price point for the user in a place that makes sense. And so we were really fortunate in timing, and we've been really fortunate in building a platform and a business that's rapidly growing in this space. And so I feel like the growth opportunities in front of us are really solid.
Yeah. I just said, I think I realized I just said 4 years running, 4 years into it, but it's really 6 years into it now, right?
It's yeah, this we're coming up on 6 since I started the ideation process, but I lose count. It feels like it's been 20, and it feels like it's been a couple months all at the same time. And
Yeah, it's either been 20 minutes or 20 years.
right, yeah, it's and my wife will tell you the same. She's like, you know, when we started, I was like, it was like 3 to 5 years, and she's like, and then, you know, she asked me a few months ago, how much longer do you think? I'm like 3 to 5 years, and she goes, is that your only answer? I was like, yes. I'm just gonna keep saying that for the next decade.
I mean, that's such a cool story, and I just, I'm so impressed with it, and I learned a lot about it here today too, intentionally. I knew enough about it to be dangerous, but understanding the bigger picture and the why it came from where it came, it's just, it's hard to not be impressed with what you built in such a short amount of time, and all the good that it's doing beyond just solving the one problem you were trying to solve, and just what a great company you're building. So
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
literally my hat is off to you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
That's it.
We're excited about what we've been building and where we're headed. So
Well, I appreciate all your time today. This has been so enlightening and so much fun, and an hour goes by pretty quick.
for sure.
You
Well,
know,
thank you for having me on here. This has been great. It's outside of my kids, it's my favorite subject to talk about, and so appreciate the opportunity to do that today.
anytime, anytime. All right, appreciate it, Matt.
Thank you.